greatest expectations. And so I absolutely, and most people don't know this if you have not homeschooled. I mean, actually, everybody had a taste of homeschooling, right? When the schools were closed down for COVID, and what you might have realized was it's a lot harder than it looks, or than you thought it might be. But really, the reality is, the majority of people who have removed their children from the public schools, they all thought that they would send their kids to public school. I mean, most of us on this call probably went to public schools ourselves, and we thought that that's what our children would do. And that was totally my husband's family has been in education for decades, and in the highest levels of education in Texas, all the way up to superintendent of a district. And so we totally thought that that's what would be the case. My daughter is my oldest child, and she had some severe learning differences. And so we were at OT and PT and vision therapy and tutoring, and we went to the school, and we worked through the IEP process, the 504 process. You know, I was helping out in the school, in the classroom twice a week for 2 years, and having to pay for my younger children to actually have babysitting those that weren't in school. And so I was there firsthand, and I saw what was going on. And that's really the reason why I pulled her out first and foremost, is she was not getting a quality education. She was very anxious. And I was just seeing a change in her demeanor and in her love for learning. And so I don't want that to be the case of anyone. And I truly believe we have the staff, we have the know-how, we have the money, we have the structure here in North Carolina where we can elevate education across the board, and we can make the schools a place where the staff and the students can't wait to get there in the morning. And that's really what I want to do. It's not about dismantling a system. It's about prioritizing how the decisions that we're making to make sure that the students are the number one focus, and their success and their safety.
Okay, thank you. Another one of our participants tonight said, "My friend and I love your ideas about improving educational policies. She heard or believes that you said that all teachers work to indoctrinate children. Did you really say that? And what did you mean when you said schools are indoctrination centers?" And if you would, take just a moment before you do that. If your name is not on your camera, I see a couple of iPhones. If you would write your name in so we'll know who you are, that would be great. And Michelle, back to that indoctrination center.
Right. So absolutely not. I believe that there are wonderful teachers. I truly believe that teaching is a calling, much like nursing. You know, I could have gone on to be a doctor, but I wanted to do the care of physical care for people, and I wanted to be a nurse. And I think the same is true of teachers. You don't go in because you want to be wealthy. You don't go in because you want fame. People go into teaching because they love children. They go in because they maybe had a wonderful experience and a mentor as a teacher who helped them, you know, incredibly when they were young people. They go in because they want to see students succeed. They love the learning experience and the fact that children come in and they're so ready and they want to learn and they want to please. And so I totally respect teaching, but I'll say this. What's happened is the indoctrination is happening through the curriculum. It's happening through the political agendas that we have all seen that are being pushed into our K through 12 system. And that is what I am fighting against. And when I think what they're talking about, one of these issues was here in Wake County, we have really struggled because there is a huge push for the sexualization of our children. There is a huge push to be talking to our children about issues that they are not ready to handle emotionally, intellectually. And so that is what I'm talking about. When I'm saying that we are using our funds, we are focusing our hiring practices, our discipline practices, even our curriculum choices based on a political agenda that might potentially go against the worldview of the parents that are there. I think that we have a huge responsibility to ensure that we are teaching to the most naive student in the classroom, and that is what we must assume. And so that was my concern, because there is, when we look at what's happening right now on our college campuses, what we've just seen in the last year with students that are, against the United States. They're burning the flag. They're talking about, the death to Israel. They are putting up flags that are of another country, and a country that has stated, that they have issues with our nation. That is indoctrination. Those are children that don't understand the truth about history. When we have children that want to be called furries, that is being not told the truth about who we are as human beings. When they are confused about what gender they are before they've gone through puberty, and when they are young and impressionable, that is a confusing issue. And we are usurping our ability for the teachers to actually teach. And we are pushing this social activism, this political activism that has no place in the K through 12 system. And I will say this, I have traveled this state for the last 3 years, and this is a majority opinion. We need to understand that the statewide education system is about educating. It is about giving life skills. It is about giving the training that is necessary so that our adults will be able, they're going to be equipped for success outside of the classroom. And so that was my point about that. I have so many wonderful teachers. Some of them are on here tonight who understand, who I am fighting for you. I believe that there are many teachers, there are many families that have left the system because of issues with safety, because of issues with this worldview that I'm discussing, because of the lack of accountability in the scholastics. There's teachers that have left because they've been forced to pass children along and not be able to even tell the parents. This happened in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Not be able to tell the parents that their student is not actually getting a 70. They were forced to give that child a 70 so that the statistics look good. And that's not the only teacher that has said that, or the only school district. So when I discuss that, that is my point. We are to teach our children how to think. We are not to tell them what to think or what to believe.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to vouchers. What is your opinion on vouchers?
Well, I absolutely believe that the money should be following the student, but there is a caveat. I am not happy that they did not put any cap on the those that can get an opportunity scholarship to go to a private school. And I really think this too. There are a lot of private schools that are not going to be receiving opportunity scholarships. One, because many of our private schools have a 2 to 3 year wait list. But the other thing is because they do not want the watchful eye of the public school system or the government looking over them. And I say, if anyone is getting tax money, then you are accountable to our General Assembly for what you are doing in your school. So I think whenever anybody, assumes that and takes on those monies, they now have put themselves under the, under the watchful eye of our government as it is written in law. But, it's interesting because until this summer, when they expanded opportunity scholarships, the big fight that I've heard really for the last 4 or 5 years has been this attack on charter schools, or this competition is probably a better term, that the charter schools don't have to do this, and the public schools are upset because they give back their students and then they keep the funding. I have heard all of those, and we definitely need to get on the same page, and we need to recognize that charter schools and traditional public schools both fall under the umbrella of the Department of Public Instruction. Both of them should have the same academic standards. Both of them should have options for students that are not going to be able to behave and follow the rules in the classroom. I think that's one way that the traditional schools are actually being harmed, is because they're looking at what the charter schools are doing, because they do tend to have a very strong code of conduct. They have a very clear expectation and a clear consequence if a student is not performing or, not willing to behaviorally do what they need to do in the classroom. We need to bring that into our traditional schools as well. We have got to bring back that safety and that discipline and that respect and that self-control, help our children to be self-controlled in our classrooms. Our teachers have got to have the backing of our administrators. And I truly believe this is going to be a short-term solution. I ask people this question: do you think it's fair for a family and a student to be stuck in a school that is failing them? I think across the board, our answer is no. And the reality in North Carolina right now is there are 37 districts out of our 115 that have no charter schools. So if you are slotted to a school, or if the only elementary schools are failing in your area, you have no other option if you cannot afford to go to the private school. And I think it is our responsibility, until we get our public education system up to par, so that we are taking care of all of the needs of every one of our students. We've got to give them an option. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, we right now have only 1 out of 3 of every of our students that is on grade level in math or in reading in the whole state of North Carolina. Our children are behind, and we cannot wait 2 or 3 or 4 years for those children right now that are in the system to have an option of getting caught up and even exceeding where they need to be on grade level. So that is my take on it. We need to ensure that our tax money is going to first student needs. And we'll probably talk about finances later, but that's where I stand on that. I think right now it's necessary because we have almost 800 schools in the state of North Carolina that have gotten a failing grade, a D or an F, for more than 3 years. And that's a lot of children that are being impacted negatively.
Wow. I was not aware that there were 37 districts with no charter schools. Following up on that voucher question, we had a question about you and Mark Robinson. Do you have a plan to do as the Tennessee governor did? He funded the establishment of the American Classical Charter Schools in Tennessee. And I had heard that maybe Hillsdale and maybe some others were interested.
Huh. I have not heard of that program, but I'd be interested in looking at it and see what that looks like. Something that I want everybody to understand when we're talking about finances is right now, over 50% of all of our state tax money goes to the K through 12 education system. And I think people don't understand this dynamic. Like, for instance, in Wake County, I would submit to you, we're a very wealthy county because we are such a huge county, first and foremost, but we have a high cost of living, high prices on homes. And so the property taxes that we are collecting as a county are higher than a lot of other counties. But what people don't recognize is, out of that money, almost 90% of the people paying property taxes have no children in public school. So you have to ask yourself this question: why are we upset if there's 200 or 300 students out of an entire county where that money from those property taxes is going to help them to get a better education, when you still have such a large pot to choose from with people that are paying their taxes, but they don't have any students that are taking advantage of that? So I think the problem is not the amount of money. The problem is that we have not prioritized it well. And that's what I intend to do. I intend to get in there. We are going to be shrinking the size of the Department of Public Instruction. We have tripled the number of directorships. They have been giving up to 60% raises for many of the people in the administration, while the teachers and our other boots on the ground staff are getting a measly 2% raise. That is not okay. What needs to happen is the spending has got to start at the classroom level, and then it works its way up. And if you don't have the funding for several of these different positions, then that's where we're going to cut. We already have a shortage of teachers, especially within our special needs students, our advanced math and science classes in many of our rural areas and many of our Title I schools. Those have got to be the priority. Education is what lifts entire communities out of poverty. And so if we are not giving our children a great education and the opportunity to be able to be successful outside of school, then what are we doing? That is the whole reason why the public education system exists.
Right, right. So you've made some comments before, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on it. Do you believe that charter schools and private schools should have some kind of testing that would show growth, maybe similar to the ones that the public schools are using, or should they be able to choose their own assessment tool?
I have to tell you, I would really like to see every school be using national standard tests at the end of the year. I definitely think that growth is very important. I think we need to give credit where credit is due. But we also need to understand that we're not going to be helping our students if you have a fourth grader that's reading at a first grade level and they just move up to second grade level, but then you move on to fifth grade. We have got to bridge that gap. We can't continue to just push them along, because everyone understands that if you don't get that solid basis in elementary school, you are completely limited as to your future in higher education, your future even as jobs. And that's why one of the things that I want to ensure is that no child leaves fifth grade without being able to show mastery of reading and writing and math. That is the foundation of all higher learning. And so I do think that our standards should be the same in terms of what is expected of student outcome at the end of the year.
That makes sense. So moving on to talk about funding, there's been a lot of fear surrounding comments that you made about removing the Department of Education and federal funding. Without federal money, how will you fund schools?
Well, first of all, I don't have that power. But President Trump has spoken of getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education. What we all need to recognize too is the Department of Education was put into place as late as 1978 by Jimmy Carter. And when he did that, the United States was actually number 2 in the world for our public education system. And now we find ourselves almost 45 years later, 46 years later, number 43. And part of the problem is we do not want the DC, we don't want Washington and those people that are so far separated from our classrooms here in North Carolina. They should not be choosing our discipline policies, our hiring practices, or our curriculum choices. And unfortunately, what's happening is they give us about 11% of our entire budget in North Carolina comes from the federal grants. But what they're doing is they're holding that money hostage. And that's why we're seeing, if you don't have a DEI program, if you don't have so many Black and brown and white students in a classroom, if you don't have, if you're not taking these specific teacher trainings, if your curriculum doesn't go by X, Y, or Z, you're not going to get your money. And so they like to tout, well, if you don't get the money, you're not going to be able to give kids lunches. If you don't get the money, you're not going to have the funding for our special needs students and our exceptional learners. And I say there are other organizations, there are other departments, government agencies that are responsible for ensuring that people have food, that are responsible for ensuring that we are obeying and following the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so those entities actually are here statewide. And so my point is, if we would stop funding so many thousands of people, we are paying their salaries, we are paying their benefits to have a job up in DC, to be making policies and to be forcing programs and directorships here in our state. And if we were not sending them that money, we could have that money here. And I just want to leave everybody with just one little anecdotal story. In the 22-23 school year here in Wake County, we received $2.1 million in our federal money. That was 11% of our budget for the 22-23 school year. Out of that $2.1 million that we received for the entire year, 1.3 million of it was spent just on the 8 DEI staff here in Wake County. And that was a mandated program with mandated positions. That was just the salaries, ladies and gentlemen. And you guys all know, being state employees, the benefits package is often more expensive than the actual salaries. So what I contend is we are looking at this money and saying, oh, it's going to be so much money, we're going to do so much great with it. It's never making it into the classroom. We are actually paying for these mandated programs, these mandated trainings, these mandated positions. We are paying out of our state and local monies for the mandated things in order to get that money. So what that's going to look like is we're going to audit it. I promise you, if we need more money because we have gone through with a fine-tooth comb and we've picked out everything that does not have a direct, direct impact, positive impact on our academic success, character development, or career preparedness. Those are going to be the three things that I look at for every decision and every funding stream that we're going to look at. If we still need more funds to be able to raise teacher pay, to raise our staff pay, to have the resources that we need so our teachers don't have to go into their own pocketbooks and pay for supplies in the classroom, that is ridiculous. And so if we need it, then I would go to the General Assembly and say, listen, we do need more money. But I am not going to ask the taxpayers of North Carolina for another dime until we have been responsible, we've been transparent, and we can show you where your money is going. So to just blindly say that if we just had more money, if we, as my opponent says, just fully funded the system, then everybody would be able to read and write and do math. Then we wouldn't have any violence in our schools. Then we would be able to recruit and retain excellent teachers. Then we would have, our kids would all be reading on grade level. It's just not true. We could dump $1 million into every first grade classroom this week, and it would not mean that our students could read or that they could count it. Money matters, but it matters most how we use it. And we need somebody that is not there, the part of the bureaucracy, part of this system, and we need to focus on the students. I do not believe that we are about funding a system. I believe the system exists to serve the students, not the other way around.
Thank you. So this one's a little complicated, and this is, there again, about money. According to the 2022 USA data, in the NC school report cards, Martin County, North Carolina, has a median family income of $44,800. Mm-hmm. They are at a 20% poverty rate. 5 out of 8 schools are failing. The money per student is $16,000. Warren County, another Eastern North Carolina county, has a median family income of $42,300, and the poverty rate is 21.2%, and 5 out of the 7 schools are failing. And the money per student there is $18,000, and it was $16,000 for Martin. Then we come to Wake County. Wake County has a median family income of $96,700 with an 8.2% poverty rate. And of the 190 schools, 41 are low performing. Per student spending is around $12,000. Even with that additional funding, children in Eastern North Carolina are struggling on a variety of levels. What can you do as superintendent to elevate their education, quality of life, and their future expectations?
Yeah, there's a lot that we can do, and we're going to do it. So I think first and foremost, we need to look at that and recognize that just proves the point that it doesn't matter about the amount of money. But I will say the smaller the district, probably the higher it has to be per student, just because you have all of your, running costs. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can be dispersed a lot more because you have your school costs of just running a system. But I'll say this, we have to look at these areas, and we need to figure out, we need to be potentially putting 2 teachers in that kindergarten through 2nd grade classroom, or through a 3rd grade classroom. We need to be raising, I've heard a lot of turnaround. When you're looking at Hoke, you're looking at some of these Robeson, there's a lot of teacher turnover. And part of that is because when you come from a very poor area, there's not a lot of other job opportunities. So if you're a married couple and you've been living on two incomes and you want to go and teach, but your spouse can't get a job that is as lucrative as it's going to be somewhere else, you're not going to choose to move to that small town. And so it's important that we might need to be bumping up those areas where it's harder to get great teachers and it's harder to retain them. Bump up the salaries in that area. And I'll say this also, we have got to be partnering with businesses in our districts across the state to help to offer every student in their junior and senior year to have a work study program. I believe every junior and senior in high school should have an opportunity to get paid to work half the day and then take their core classes the other half of the day. We need to show them and give them the life skills, give them the work skills, give them the understanding of, all this stuff that you're learning in school isn't just useless, right? I think once kids end up being on the job for a couple of months, all of a sudden they start thinking, I probably do need to pay a little bit more attention in my math class. I probably do want to know how to express myself better if I think I want to own my own business. I probably do need to look at economics and take a course on budgeting and figuring out how I'm going to live on my own and make things work. So I think that that's one thing that we need to do across the state of North Carolina is really focus on that vocational training as an offer to every student. And I think when we will increase the educational prowess, the academic success of our students, we are actually going to be attracting more businesses, and that's going to help the entire economy of these smaller and more rural areas as a whole.
Okay. So now we're going to move to standards, and we're going to talk about the K-12 standards. One of our questions and our participants stated, standards need to be restored in North Carolina education from kindergarten up. I'm wondering if the participant or the question is really speaking to the lowering or rewriting of standards over the last few years. How would you raise the bar and articulate that to parents, teachers, and all North Carolina stakeholders?
Yeah, that is one of the direct jobs of the DPI. So the way that our Constitution is written, the General Assembly writes the laws for education, and then the State Board of Education sets forth policy, but then it is the Department of Public Instruction who actually sets standards. And those are the standards that are given to the 115 districts, to the school boards, and then they determine how they're going to, meet that out to each of their individual schools. So I think we absolutely have to raise the bar of excellence, not only in conduct, but also in our academic performance. I think we need to look and see what states around the nation are doing best in math. How about even around the world? Why don't we look at what they're doing in Japan? Why don't we look at what they're doing in India with their STEM programs, with their IIT programs, with their mathematics? Why don't we look at who has the strongest curriculums and the strongest standards where I think our children will rise to the occasion. Our kids are filled with potential. They want to learn. They want to be excellent. They want to do well. And so I think when we raise that, it's going to be an enthusiastic and healthy competition is what makes us all be the best that we can be. And so I would be looking at those things, and you guys might not know, but every year there's about 3 of our standards in our subject matters that are kind of rewritten. Like we just wrote the health standards last year that was just completed. So that is kind of an ongoing process. But I do think that we need to look at what has worked, what is working, and take things that are not just research based, but are also results based. And let me explain the difference. Like we all know the different facets of literacy, like learning to read. There's the phonics portion, there's the spelling portion, there's the vocabulary portion, there's the comprehension issue. And it's all those things. And the researchers can say, these are the 5 tools that you need to ensure that our children are going to be able to read and understand what they're reading, right? But there's a difference that's considered research-based because you look at a curriculum and you go, oh, well, this has all of these tenets laid out, so this must be a great program. I say we need to look at a results-based program. I say, where have people actually successfully raised those literacy rates? Where have they gone into a school system where the students are really struggling and managed to make it be successful across the board, regardless of what a child's, learning level is? And that's going to be results-based. And I think that we should be making our standards, we should be choosing our curriculum, we should be planning our teacher trainings around things that have the results to back it up, that say this has worked in this place and in that place and in this place, and we don't need to recreate the wheel. Let's just implement it here.
Okay, sounds good. I want to move on to summer school. One of our folks wrote, summer school needs 2 weeks and not an online credit recovery program. Can you address the Read to Achieve legislation regarding third graders in summer school as it is right now, and what your thoughts are about online summer school, or what ages or what grade?
I struggle with anything online. I think children really need that one-on-one, face-to-face, especially in those early years where you're forming their ability to read and to understand and to comprehend. And so there's been great success in several counties here in North Carolina where they've just been doing targeted tutoring, just 30 minutes a day for 3 days a week, but it's a very small group. It's about 5 or 6 students with a teacher, and they've seen incredible results in not only increasing their math and their reading literacy, but also in their behavior. And I think that one of the things I'd like to do, even in that K-5 system, is take those handheld devices out of our children's hands. I think that we are doing them a disservice when they're not able to look at our face and look at our mouths and see how it's learned. The children, when they're very young, that's what they do. It's been stated that even at 8 months old, babies start looking at their parents' mouth to figure out how they're making sounds. And that is something that our youngest learners really need to have. So I am not a fan of the online learning in terms of when the children are that young. Especially if the children haven't been picking it up. I think that it's absolutely necessary that we have that face-to-face time.
Okay. Do you see yourself continuing with the letters program, that phonics instruction for teachers that can be used for their CEUs for license renewal? And do you have ideas for other training that you would like to see?
Yes, I've heard a lot of good things about the letters and the science of reading, and so I think it's good that we are moving back in that direction rather than the whole word instruction. I think our children haven't done that well with that, and so I'm encouraged to see that. I will say I had an hour-and-a-half conversation a couple weeks ago with a Dr. Conway down in Florida who has something called the Now Project, and he's a neurodevelopmental physician, and he has a really short and user-friendly way to kind of analyze our youngest students, even as young as 4, that we can determine whether or not a child has a genetic predisposition to issues with literacy, whether that's dyslexia, dysgraphia, any of the like. And so, but then what he does is it's not only a diagnostic tool, but it's also, there's some practical trainings that we can put into every classroom that we can actually kind of overcome the issues before they even would, present themselves. And I'd like to see what he does. I've asked him, he said he would come up here, and I'd like to see that even being implemented into our colleges and our universities. I think we have got to expand our educators' understanding of exceptional learners as well as the ESL. I think every teacher that comes out of college, when you get your degree, you should feel confident that you can go into a classroom with a various array of student learning styles, learning abilities, and whatever they might have, and you need to be able to handle that, because that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing fewer students with those needs. Where it's actually expanding. And so I would love to see, even if we could make some early detection is so important, right? If we can get ahead of it and not be waiting until, 3rd grade at the end of that grade, when you realize, oh my goodness, you're not really ready to go on. I think that we need to be catching that earlier. I think we need to use our central office to be able to do some of those, to have some of those, I'm blanking, to be able to do the testing for our students during the summer months, so that I'd love to see that before our teachers even get into the classroom in August, that we can say to them, look, this is your classroom. These are the students that you have, and here's their IEPs, or here's, some of their learning needs. And this is the process through which we're going to try, to help the student to get the services they need. I think it needs to be a little bit more across the board. Not that we don't still have an individualized education plan. Everybody should be able to have that, but we should have kind of pathways that we can put our students on. And that should be, the teachers should have input into that, but we shouldn't make them be the ones that are writing these, complicated plans. And we need to take some of that administrative task off of our teachers' shoulders, I think.
Right. Sounds like to me you're talking about using more early intervention, and you have that boots on the ground way of thinking, is that the folks up in central office need to be involved with what's happening in the schools. That's what it sounds like to me.
Right.
So Michelle, we know that you've been concerned about inappropriate literature and appropriate literature for students at all levels and grades. How do you feel about the battle of the books and the process for which those books are chosen? And do you see battle of the books as something positive or negative?
Well, I mean, it sounds to me anytime that we can foster a love for reading and kind of get kids into wanting to talk about literature, I think that is a positive. I think that I'm not completely sure. I know the group that is choosing the books, I'm not sure what the process is through which they are choosing the books that are being read. I think that does need to be looked at, but only because, we do have a lot of content that parents have been concerned about, and we've been concerned about. But I absolutely, anything that we can do to get our young people reading, it really does unlock the imagination. It really gives stories of people that have done amazing things, and it expands people's minds to be beyond just the microcosm of who we are and where we live. And I think that's important, especially for our young people. I think we have a very myopic view of the world, and I think that reading stories of other people from around the world, and even from different cultures and whatnot, only expands our compassion and our understanding. Are you muted? I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about, math and English. So remedial math and English courses, according to one of our participants, should be removed from all colleges and universities in North Carolina receiving taxpayer funding. I think what they're really questioning is the concern that we have about the large number of students that are needing remedial classes before beginning their college or university coursework. I'm assuming that's what it's addressing.
Well, I agree with that 100%, because we should not be graduating students if they are not reading and doing math at a 12th grade level. That is what is assumed when you go into your freshman year, whether it's in a community college or whether it's at a university. It's assumed that you are at the level of a first year college student. So that's why we really need to be focusing on scholastics and not on all of this other activism that we've seen that has kind of usurped our focus, I believe, in our public school system.
Right. How do you feel about the current dropout age that we have in schools?
Is it 16?
Yep.
Yeah. I really think, at this stage, I think we need to beef it up to 18, because we already know that the kids, even if they are leaving at 18, a lot of them aren't leaving with the skills and with the educational knowledge that they need to be successful. But I think unfortunately, when we do pass children along, year after year after year, by the time you get to be 14 and 15 years old, if you don't think that I'm not college material, or, now I'm feeling insecure because somebody's going to find out that I'm only reading on a third grade level, I think that that is a very insecure place for people, for our young people to feel. And I think that's one of the reasons why I would like to see us start really helping our children to figure out what makes them tick when they're even in middle school, so that we can put them onto different pathways in high school. So that I believe if they're part of a vocational program, if they're taking a mechanics class, or they're doing welding, or they're in an engineering class, or a pre-teacher class, or nursing class, or cosmetology, whatever it might be, if they really enjoy that, then they're going to want to come to school. They're going to want to stay there. And I think that if they understand that in order to stay in that program, they also have to do well in their core classes, I think we're going to see a lower dropout rate. What we're seeing right now is we need to infuse hope, we need to infuse purpose, and we need to encourage our students that there is something that you can do to be financially independent, something that you can enjoy, something that you can give back to the community. And there's somewhere that you fit in society, and we want to help you to figure that out, so you aren't going to go and think that your only option is to be a part of this gang, or to go work at a minimum wage job and you're going to always struggle, or whatever it might be. Our children, we've got to tell them. There used to be that motto of, you can be anything you want to be. Like, we need to start telling that to our kids very young. And I think that really is the basis of the American dream. It was people that came here that were willing to work hard, 2 and 3 jobs, so that they could choose their future. And I think we as Americans, we have that option, but only if our public school system is excellent.
Thank you. So let's move to safety. Tell us some of your plans to make schools a safer place.
Well, I would love to see a statewide SRO program coming from the DPI. I think if we could make that be across the board, where you're getting your training, where we're choosing people who are not there just to be punitive, they really want to invest into the lives of our young people. They want to be the mentors, maybe even coaches, maybe teaching the health classes, maybe doing the driver's ed, whatever it might be. But I would like to see that across the board. There's two facets of safety the way that I see it. First is safety from outside threats, and that is knowing every person that comes onto our campus. That's having, great video surveillance. That's having 2 double doors and a 1 entry system once the school day starts. That's having at least 2 officers in every school. Obviously, in our high schools, we'll probably need more because there's a lot more children. But I will say that's the outside threat. But what we also need to focus on is what's happening in the classrooms today. And when I tell people that almost 1,500 teachers were assaulted on the job in North Carolina last year, they gasp when they hear that. And so we have got to bring back discipline to the classroom. We have got to give the backing and the skills and the training and the freedom to be able to have classroom management for all of our teachers. And they should not have to be the go-between between the parents and just themselves. That needs to fall onto the administrators. And under my administration, that will be the #1 role of any principal, is to create a culture of civility and order and respect, a place, as I said before, where the kids, the students, the parents, they can't wait to get there. They feel like this is a beacon of hope in the community. They feel like there's all kinds of opportunities for their children, and we are united in the same vision of ensuring that every student gets what they need.
Right. Following that question or that statement, how are you going to fund these SROs?
Well, that's going to have to be a priority. And as I said before, we've got to look at where our funding is going. And I want to go in and look at the programs. The government is really good at offering you a program. Oh, you got that problem? Let us give you a program. And here's all the directors you need and the administrative assistants. And here's the curriculum that you have to rewrite. And here's the training that you need to do, and blah, blah, blah. And I say, when we get in there, it's not just going to be about where is this money going, but that's going to be very important. It's also going to be, what programs are we currently funding that we have been funding that cannot prove in the last 5 years that they have statistically had a positive impact on academic excellence, character development, or career preparedness. And if they cannot prove that, then that program needs to be dropped. And I tell people, I was an emergency room nurse for years. I was a triage nurse, and I had to find what is the life-threatening issue that has to be dealt with first whenever a patient would come in. And I feel like we're in critical care mode for our school system. We have got to focus on what are the most important issues and fund those first. And I think if our students, if our staff are not safe, if there is not discipline and respect in the classroom, learning is not happening. It has to be a priority.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I do want to share an idea that someone shared through their question.
Sure.
What do you think about teachers wearing electronic emergency button lanyards?
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. And I actually went to the student resource officer convention a couple of months ago in Concord, and I have the cards of several. I've been speaking with different people that actually have great safety measures in line. And for those of you that don't know, so we do have a school safety advisory council. You can look at the members on our website, and I did that within the first week of winning the primary in March. And these are people who we're gathering all of the best practices around our country and even elsewhere to say, where do we have the safest schools? Where do we have the least behavioral issues? Where do we have the most success in recruiting and retaining teachers and even keeping students in school and getting them to school? Because we know truancy is a big issue as well here in North Carolina. So I think, as I said before, we need to be we need to be constantly researching, constantly looking and seeing best practices elsewhere so that we can just put it into the system here in North Carolina. You know, there's a lot of schools around North Carolina that have great systems. Let's look at them and say, okay, what did you do? And what can we do across the board in all 115 districts?
Great, thank you. Another question about security. We know having cell phones in the classroom and having accessible to our students can negatively impact their learning. However, some parents, including myself, want to be able to reach my child anytime. In the event of an emergency, and cell phones also have played a role in exposing inappropriate and unsafe behaviors in our schools. What do you think about the role of cell phones?
Well, I understand people's concern, and especially when we have seen so many of these personal videos just in the last year here in North Carolina of teachers being assaulted, of children being assaulted. I mean, we even have had a child stabbed to death here in Southeast Raleigh, which is absolutely tragic. But I believe even if we had a box, if the teacher had a box on his or her desk, and that is where all of the cell phones go at the beginning of class, and you can't get it until after class, so that if there is some type of emergency, you could get to it. But that's one of the reasons why I am in favor of having video cameras in the classrooms. I think, and that's one of the roles that I would want our officers to be doing, is watching those. It doesn't even have to be on so that you're listening to the conversation, but I have to tell you, it's going to be protecting teachers just as much as it is children, because there are a lot of teachers that have been accused of things, and it's your word against a student's word, and that's not fair to our teachers. So unfortunately, I just feel like we are in that place right now in society that we do need accountability and we need transparency. But I don't think that students should have to have their cell phone on them while instructional time is happening.
Great. Well, that takes care of our questions. Did anyone else, I see we have just a couple of minutes left. Did anyone else have a question? I don't see any. Oh yeah, I do see a hand up. Hey, Terry, what is your question?
I didn't have a question. I was just in the last thing that Michelle was talking about having cameras in the classroom. I think that would be real good to have, just for accountability, and also give another increased sense of security in the schools.
Thanks, Carrie.
I'm looking to see if there's anyone else that had a hand up. I don't see any, so I guess we will come to an end unless I missed somebody. I don't think that I did. I want to thank you, Michelle, for taking your time away from your family to be with us tonight. And I do want to read a comment that someone did put out there. It said, "Thank you for your candidacy. You're a brilliant advocate for excellent education in North Carolina."
Oh,
So thank you. There are lots of folks who love you. Uh-oh, I see a hand up. Natasha. Hi, Natasha. Hang
You're
on, we're going to
muted.
unmute you.
Yeah.
Okay. The last question was my question, Michelle. Thank you so much for answering that. I'm a candidate for New Hanover County, and that is one of the policies that has been up for discussion recently. And I struggle with it because I understand, excuse me, I understand that there's the studies that have proven that the children do better without the distraction. And not only that, but the bullying, especially between girls, goes down.
Yeah.
And that's a huge deal for a child, especially that's typically the age that all children are introduced to having a cell phone. And my daughter was going through COVID right at that time. So maybe it felt a little, I don't know, exacerbated from that, but it did play a huge part in just my everyday life. And I can't imagine what it's like for a teacher trying to get the attention of 30 kids.
Mhm.
But we have seen that sometimes those phones are the only reason that we've learned what's going on in our classroom. And I'm really glad that the other parent showed his support for it, because what I hear is like, oh, that's an invasion of privacy. But I think a lot of parents feel like myself and the other gentleman, like, not really. I want to be able to know what's going on in that classroom at all time, whether I'm listening to it or not. You can always, with the SROs listening, I think that's an aspect I didn't even consider, but I like the sound of that. I'm super supportive of it, and I hope that you have the support across the state for that, because I never imagined safety being this big of an issue. What does it look like with having access to cell phones? What does that look like for teachers monitoring for kids to, using AI in places that they're not supposed to? How are we going to monitor that?
Well, and I think that's why they don't have it during classroom time. And I'll say this, I mean, if we have a great visual surveillance system, right, in the schools, you're not going to need kids' individual phones
Right.
to be taking video. I am concerned because bullying is a real problem, and we seem to not even be talking about it anymore. But that is all happening within the screen. And I think too, we are limiting our children from being able to have face-to-face conversations and to learn empathy. Empathy happens through watching people's facial expressions, their body language, and understanding how your words and your actions are actually impacting them. And when it's all done through this screen, you totally miss out on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's anxiety, there's depression, there's an increase in self-harm and suicide attempts and all of this. We are it is, and this is the other thing. If no one has their phone in school, then no one's going to have that FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, right? If it's just across the board, then nobody's going to be like, well, so-and-so's allowed to have it and so-and-so's allowed to have it. So we do need to look if we can maintain it. And if teachers feel like they have the attention of the students, that it is helping with behavioral issues and with academic performance, to just put it in a box at the front of a room, that's great. But I say the teachers need to say, listen, it's still not working. This is still a distraction. It's still harming. Then you say, okay, well, then you keep it in your backpack, you keep it in your locker, whatever it might be. But the good thing also, I mean, you probably all know this, everybody who's had teenage kids, one of the greatest things about the phone is being able to take it away, because it's just a natural, it's just a natural consequence, right? To bad behavior. So I guess there is that there is that also.
Yes. Well, thank you, Michelle. I see our time is up. We were slotted for an hour. Email Michelle if you have further questions. Remember, early voting starts this week. We want everybody to get out and vote. Vote your values. Vote your values. Thank you,
Vote for
Michelle.
me.
Thanks. Yeah, vote for Michelle. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We look forward to seeing you at another town hall, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming on.